Great. Good morning, everybody. We're going to be speaking today about seller's coverage provided by American Home Shield. It's interesting as we enter our 51st year of service to our community. American Home Shield is still doing the same kind of things that we were in 1971 when we began the home warranty industry. As you remember, we call it the home warranty industry, but the Texas Real Estate Commission asked in 1997 for the realtor community to please not call it that. And when you review your sales agreement between your seller and buyer, you'll see that paragraph 7H reflects what we call a residential service contract instead of the wording home warranty. And the main reason the Texas Real Estate Commission wanted you to do that is basically because homeowners, customers, buyers, and sellers think they know what the word warranty means, and they have a preconceived idea of what they think it is, what it should be, and how it should work. The warranty industry does not work like any other insurance industry, although it's very similar to how it populates different things. There is a deductible, there is a premium, and what we call that is the deductible, we call it a trade service fee. When we go out to the property to do the diagnosis, the service call fee is $75. And that's basically for the service call and the diagnosis to determine what the cause of the failure is. Those of you that have been in one of my classes before probably remember rule number 1 in the home warranty industry for a residential service contract. The reason for repair has to be because of normal wear and tear. Otherwise, it could be a denial of the contract. I'll be sending out, let me make a note, I'll be sending out the terms and conditions of the coverage to everyone that's on the call this morning. It's an 8-page document, and that is available in your offices, but it may not be fingertip access. So for those of your buyers and sellers that like to know all about the coverage, what's covered, what's not covered, what the exclusions and limitations are, this would be the document that you could share with them that explains the coverage and how we work. We also have a digital customer brochure that's a 3-page color brochure that's more user-friendly, but it does not have the exclusions, limitations, and what's not covered. So I'll send you that as well, the digital customer copy. Though that's available as well. The main form that you'll be using is either on our website, pro.ahs.com, or the paper product of the 2-page summary and pricing card. Let me pull up that just for an example here this morning. Bear with me one second. Could somebody unmute and let me know if you can see that, please?
No, we can't.
Can't see it. Well, I have a malfunction here. I'm not having any luck here, folks. Bear with me. I'm so sorry. How about now? Can someone let me know if you can see it?
Now we can see it.
Great, thank you. So here's your order form, and above it you can see the chart for coverage. We're talking specifically about seller coverage today, and in the right-hand column of the chart you'll see that what is covered for sellers is very limited. The reason for that is when you scroll down to the pricing, you'll see that the Shield Essential Plan for a 1-year coverage is $450, but we only charge the seller's option $75. So there's no way that we could do the same coverage for that substantial amount of difference, right? So what we do is we limit not the items covered, because we cover all of the same items that's in the Shield Essential for your buyer. Again, this plan for your buyer is $450. The plan for your seller is $75 and includes the major systems, the essential items to keep the household running: air conditioning, heating, plumbing, ductwork, electrical, and water heaters. So the way it works is that our system automatically populates the buyer coverage of $450 and attaches it to that seller coverage. You'll see that in the form below when you add your total. So the seller's coverage option for $75, if you tried to populate it, it would not populate without adding something for the buyer. Now don't get excited here. Don't get excited. Don't panic. Hang with me. Here you can do the total of $525. Now that's not going to be the amount of the invoice. Why? Because in Texas, it's the seller's option as to how much they pay or don't pay in your sales contract, right? In your sales contract, that's completely what's going to determine what the seller pays. So bear with me. On your listing appointment, I don't know when you're going to be talking about the seller's coverage to your sellers. Most agents do it when they're talking about the costs related to the closing. So you have your net sheet that you'll be going over, I'm sure, with the seller. And you'll be talking about the commission. You'll be talking about the title policy, maybe what VA expenses might be, maybe what the survey cost would be. And somewhere on that net sheet, you'll have something that says home protection plan, residential service contract. And when you get to that paragraph of your net sheet, it's an easy time to tell the seller what that is. Now, some of your sellers might already have the coverage. Like I said, we've been doing this in Texas for 50 years. A lot of your listings that you'll be taking on pre-owned homes already have the seller's coverage in place because they have their own policy that they've renewed over the years. As a matter of fact, I think it was in your last sales meeting, maybe a couple of weeks ago, or maybe in the May meeting, when I was talking about the number of repairs that we had done for your community. 57% of those repairs that week were done for our renewal customers, the people that have stayed with the product and continue to renew year after year. So some of the listings that you go on are going to already have a coverage in place. So let's talk about how that conversation goes. On the net sheet, when you come to the paragraph about residential service contract, it's easy to say to the seller, so Mr. Seller, do you have in place any kind of home protection plan, home service agreement, maybe a home warranty that you currently have in place on your property at this time? That's an easy way to start the conversation. They'll either know exactly what you're talking about and maybe even pull out the document for you, or they'll ask you, what is that? And this is the main reason we don't want you calling it a warranty, because they, again, will go automatically to what's covered in their own mind, and they might be incorrect. As the major cost of complaints against our industry is that people don't understand what we do and how we work. So an easy explanation of a residential service contract is just that. It's a service agreement that helps with home repairs on major systems while your house is either on the market or for the buyer after closing. Either on the market or after closing. And here they might ask you, well, what is the cost? And of course, that depends. It depends entirely on the negotiations when that offer comes in, because you, Mr. Seller, are in control of how much expense you're willing to allow for the buyer. Most offers in previous years, buyers have expected $500 or $600 of an allowance towards future home repairs, Mr. Seller, because you don't want those repair calls after you move out, and it takes that risk and that liability off of your shoulders. That's the point where some of the questions will start occurring. They'll ask you, what does it cover? Well, you can pull out your chart: heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical, and water heater. Be sure that you let them know at that time that there's some limitations as to how much will be covered by that policy. Any questions beyond that, I would highly recommend that you give them my phone number and my email. You don't want to spend your listing appointment explaining the home warranty industry to someone who doesn't understand it. But what you want to specifically do is to get their involvement in whether or not they're open to providing that for a buyer in today's market. A lot of times the answer will be no, because you'll have multiple offers. But it's a good idea on your net sheet just to put something in there so that they're not completely unaware of that possibility. So what questions do you have at this time? Does that seem like a pretty easy way to have a conversation with the seller? I'll take your silence as a yes. If they want the coverage for themselves, it's a real easy process. You can send me an email with their name, address, and phone number and email, or you can just call our 1-800 number. This information will be in the email that I'll send to you after our class today. Some of you will want to go on the pro site. That's PRO, like professional, pro.ahs.com. This is where you can keep a roster of all your listings, all your buyers, all of your orders, so that at some point in time, if one of your buyers wants to upgrade to more coverage, or maybe they want to add the swimming pool coverage before closing, changes like that can be automatically made with the click of a button, and you have control of your own account at American Home Shield. So take a note, pro.ahs.com, and I'll send you that information as well. Let me make a note. So let me get back to our chart. Hang on, bear with me, see if I can do this. Again, this is a good thing to share with them when you're talking about the seller's coverage. It shows the limitations of which items will be covered for that seller. Major systems like heating, cooling, ductwork, plumbing, water heater, and electrical. You'll see that the appliances that are covered under the Shield Plus and the Shield Complete are prohibited from the seller coverage. Again, that's simply because of our cost. We're not going to offer all of this coverage for a seller for $75, right? Now, if your seller is interested in getting this coverage, then they can go ahead and make a prepayment, make monthly payments, and keep the coverage on everything if they want to by paying in advance up front for more coverage. But most sellers usually have their house pretty much ready to put on the market, and most sellers don't want to pay anything until they go to closing. And that's the beauty of the seller coverage under this plan. The additional $75 that they pay for their coverage is not payable until closing. And if it doesn't close, they don't pay. So let me say that again. If the contract doesn't close, the sellers do not pay for their coverage. Now, maybe we've done a repair during the listing period, right? Maybe we've done a repair. Well, if they've done a repair, that's history. We're not going to go back to that seller and ask for any money on that repair. We're just going to go forward in the hopes that the seller will continue using us on the future contract. What questions do you have here? The $75 for seller coverage is not payable until closing. I'll take your silence as you got this, right? One thing to keep in mind about the seller's coverage, it's only good for 6 months because most listings will sell during that time, right? You'd agree with that. The 6-month coverage, if you are one of those agents that likes to keep control of your information and you use the PRO, the Pro site, then that account that you set up with yourself at American Home Shield will send you a reminder at the end of 6 months that if the house is still on the market, you'll need to renew that seller's coverage for another 6 months. And we'll be happy to do that after a review of the coverage and what we've done on that property. So let's talk about that a little bit. Seller's coverage option. Cover your home for up to 6 months while it's on the market with the same home systems from the Shield Essential Plan. Look right here. This is important, folks. Here's one of the limitations. Subject to a $2,000 cap during the listing period and renewable upon review at the discretion of American Home Shield after the 6-month period, up to 18 months. So for that same $75, and in different markets, we have held sellers coverage for up to 18 months. Some properties during different markets, especially if they're unique properties, maybe out in the country somewhere, maybe overpriced, they'll take longer than 6 months to sell. If we've not spent $2,000 on repairs for those sellers, then we will renew that seller coverage every 6 months up to an 18-month period. So for $75, guys, that can be a great value. This is the critical part down here. Again, the options are not available for sellers. Only the Shield Essential Plan is available for sellers, with the exception of the termite coverage. The main responsibility that you have as a J.B. Goodwin agent is just to present the opportunity. And major concern for your broker, J.B. Goodwin, is to get a signature right here in the lower left-hand corner. This is available in your, I think you use the dot loop program. This is available very easily in that program, or you can use this form right here that I will send to you, and they can sign this form interactively for you. They either accept the benefits of the warranty or they decline the opportunity. And let me talk about this just for a second. We have a lot of very successful and seasoned agents over the years that always put the seller's coverage in place no matter what the seller requested. And the reason for that, some of these seasoned agents understand that things break. They understand that sometimes at that darn inspection, things that nobody expects come up. Wouldn't it be nice to have some help with the seller's budget on the house that they're leaving to not have 100% of that expense? Maybe American Home Shield for that $75 will fix the problem. And if it's a major problem where the cost is over $2,000, won't it be nice to have $2,000 of budget protection? Now, on occasion, let me just be sure that you understand this. On a major replacement of a water heater, a major replacement of an air conditioner, your homeowner is going to have other expenses in addition to that $75. Again, there's no way we can sell a product for $75 and spend thousands of dollars regularly, and if that property doesn't sell, not get paid for the coverage. Be careful how you promise what's covered. Here's the reason, guys. American Home Shield doesn't know if something's going to be covered or not. until we're at the property, diagnosing the repair, and sending that repair request to the authorization department. Once the authorization department determines whether it's a covered item or not, that is the point in time when we know if something's covered or not. So even though it's going to be tempting to come up to this little handy chart and tell the seller about all this wonderful coverage, please be sure that you also let them know it may not cover 100% of every covered item. What questions do you have for me? I'll take your silence as that I did a good job and you understand. What I'd like
You
to
do a
do
great
now,
job.
say again?
I said, you always do a great job.
Oh, hi, Veronica. How are you
Hi,
today?
honey. I'm great.
I'd like to share with you some of the frequently asked questions that I get from people that are using the seller's coverage. Some of them we've already talked about. I had a call last, I think it was Thanksgiving. Debbie, my seller's microwave is not working and Thanksgiving's coming up. We have the seller's coverage. Why did you deny it? Who can answer the question for me? Appliances are not covered under the seller's plan, right? Appliances are only covered under the Shield Plus or the Shield Complete. Another question that I had, Debbie, my seller's pool is not working right. I think there's something wrong with the pump. Why did American Home Shield deny the coverage for the seller? I think you know the answer. The options are only available for the buyer unless it's a termite situation. And then the sellers can add $53 to their expense at closing for the seller's protection plan for the termite coverage. We'll be talking about that in another class. What questions do you have for me? Let me share with you now, see if I can do this right. Share screen, share entire screen, select the screen, share. Wow, lots of things here. And let me go to Well, thank you for sticking with me. I'm not sure how long I was gone. Can somebody tell me? I was just talking away. Victor, Julia, are you still with me or no? Hi, Victor. How about you, LaQuincia?
Would that be all right? Whatever.
Julia's still here.
Thank you. Can you tell me when we lost the signal? Because I know where we were recording. Did you see anything from the pro site?
No, I didn't.
Okay, let me try
Julia.
that again. Obviously, I have a bad connection this morning, folks. I'm so sorry. Thank you for sticking with me. And Julia, would you or Victor or LaQuincia stay mobile? Stay with your, keep talking to me so that I can tell if I've lost it. Are you still there?
I'm still here. This is Julia.
Thank you, Julia.
It has felt like a knife between myself. I'm talking about all. And so when I left the doctor Tuesday, I thought to myself,
How about now? Are you still with me?
Yes.
And can you hear this?
Yes, I can hear you.
Do you see the place a new order, Julia?
Yes.
Great. Okay, this is what I am so sorry, folks. This is the website you'll have to go to. Please make a note of the https://pro.ahs.com. You'll have to enter that entire address the first time that you go to place the order. I've pre-populated this with the seller's coverage, and let me start a new order so you can see how that was done. When you register, you're not going to have multiple offices like I do in my system. You're already going to be pre-populated with JB Goodwin, and you're already going to be pre-populated with your own name. So in this example, we're doing the seller's coverage. And let's enter an address here. You have to hit the save button, of course, every time. And here the system will ask you if it's a single family residence, a condominium, a townhouse. We do not cover sellers for rental properties of duplex, triplex, fourplex, but we do all the others: mobile home, townhome, condominium. We don't need the exact square footage, but we need to know if it's less than or more than 5,000 square feet because there's a price change. You'll enter the seller's information, their phone number, and their email address. You don't have a buyer at this time, right? You just listed the property, so there's no buyer currently. Now later, when you've negotiated the sale of the property and you're getting ready for closing, at that point, you would need to add yes and enter your buyer's information as well as your title company information. But when you just have the property listed, the answer is no. We'll save that and we'll go on to include the seller's coverage, yes. And at this time, you have to select some sort of a buyer's coverage so that the order will proceed. Again, don't be alarmed. It's not going to bill the title company yet. It's not going to bill the seller yet. The seller will only be responsible for their $75 and whatever they agree to in the negotiations of the sale of the property. So rather than select a more expensive plan, we're just going to stick with the basic, the 1 year, and the Shield Essential. You'll see that this already pre-populates the buyer 1 year plan with the seller's coverage. to add to the 525, and there's your total. What questions do you have for me?
None.
The save button is what you need to click, and I'm not going to populate this order because it's not a real person. But after you hit the submit order right down here, you have another screen that will populate down at the bottom, and it'll populate as documents. Just click that button when it opens up down here, and then you can send documents to whoever needs copies. Now, once you've actually got a buyer, you've negotiated the sale of the contract, and you know that you're going to be closing, at this point, please be sure to go back and edit the buyer information. You don't have to add a seller, the buyer's agent necessarily, but you do have to clear this button where it says no, because after you've sold the property and you're getting ready for closing, you do have a buyer. And you'll need to have their phone number and their email address. Now, let's think about that for a minute. If you're the seller's agent, do you always have access to that? Maybe not. Maybe not. So if you have trouble with that additional information, just call me and let me get the information for you and proceed on your behalf, okay? But you will know the closing date. Guys, don't do this to yourself. Don't try to order it the same day of closing, because your title company, they need a few days ahead of time, right? At least give them a week, please. We'll say we have a closing next Wednesday. And you'll want them to get a copy of the invoice, right? In my system, guys, I have all the title companies here in San Antonio and the surrounding area. But at first, you won't have anybody in yours. Let's say that you're searching for Grant Title Company, and you don't have it populated in your library yet. So let's say you already know the zip code, and it'll show all of the title companies in that area. And I was looking for Grant. Oh, you know what? I meant Guarantee. I forgot. It'll help you remember, and that way you can choose the office. It pre-populates for you right there. Now, apparently they don't have Janet in the system, so we're going to add Janet. And her email. Hit the save button. Hit the save button and submit your order. What questions do you have for me, guys? I'm going to cancel this out here and come back to you guys. Did I lose you? I hear you, but I don't see you.
I'm
Julia,
still here. This is Julia.
can you see me, or do you still see my screen?
I see you.
Okay, good, very good. So sometimes we'll have sellers that already have the coverage on their property. If a seller that you encounter already has American Home Shield in place, then I'll need to go behind the scenes in our operations and accounting department to help you with that order. And here's the reason why. Just like you, the real estate agent, you cannot sell a property to two different parties, right? You only have one buyer. Likewise, at American Home Shield, we can only have one family at that address. So you're not going to be able to, because of privacy issues, you're not going to be able to change the owner of that property and the coverage. You'll have to get my help on that. So I had put my phone number and my email there in the chat bar so that you have that easy access. And I'll be sending you what we talked about earlier, the terms of the agreement and that digital copy for the buyer and seller to review. It's like a trifold. You have those in your offices as well. And if any of you would like me to mail a packet to you personally at your home, I can easily do that, or I can drop it off at your office anytime. What questions do you have for me today?
I just have one question.
Yes, please.
So if I represent the seller and the seller orders the home warranty, the 75 for the seller coverage, but also put in the buyer in the invoice, if later the buyer choose to use another home warranty, the seller is not responsible for the 525. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The seller only is responsible if two things happen. Number one, if that seller closes on the transaction with the buyer choosing American Home Shield. Thank you for that. Yes. So basically, would you say there's any risk involved for the seller ordering the seller coverage? They're promising to pay $75 if it closes and if the buyer wants American Home Shield. And they get a $2,000 allowance towards any repairs that come up during the listing period. Does it sound like a reasonable thing to explain?
Yes, it does.
A lot of times the sellers are going to be like, that's too good to be true. I don't believe you. What else is up with that, right? Have them call me. I'll be glad to put something in writing to them or set their mind at ease, because some people are like, why don't you bill me for something? You know, why don't you bill me for something? Especially if you, because this has happened on occasion where we've maybe replaced a water heater. Maybe we replaced an air conditioning compressor. Maybe we did a big repair. And the seller's like, okay, so what do I owe you? Well, whatever you paid for that non-covered things in the repair or whatever happened. That's in the past. We're going forward. You're not closing. You don't owe us anything. Your buyer picked somebody else. You don't owe us anything. Well, that's too good to be true. I said, well, yeah, quite frankly, a few years ago, we used to chase down those sellers and say, wait a minute, we didn't get paid for the buyer coverage. We want some money from somewhere. Well, can you imagine how unprofessional that would be, right? Guys, we've been doing this for 50 years. We want that seller's business for the next home and the next home and the next home, right? So that's the reason that we're doing this promotion this way. If the buyer doesn't take American Home Shield at closing, the seller doesn't owe for the cost of the coverage. Thanks for bringing up that question. And tell me how you say your name.
Chi-Jin.
Chi-Jin.
Chi-Chi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The main thing that I'd like to have you remember is that we don't cover everything for the seller. I'll tell you one story that happened over here off of Hebner in 1604. There was a property for sale a while back. The seller had this listing coverage in place. And wouldn't you know it, the day of the walkthrough inspection, the buyer found a wet spot on the ceiling of one of the rooms. That room was right below the water heater. The day of closing, that water heater decided to leak. It hadn't leaked very much. It wasn't a big secondary damage problem, but there was water in the attic. Now, closing was going to happen like within an hour. There's no way American Home Shield could get somebody out to that property in an hour. So what we did in that particular instance, I was able to get a plumber later that afternoon. He did a diagnosis of the water heater. He sent the report to our authorization department. Our authorization reviewed it, and we wrote a letter to the title company explaining that the water heater, material, and labor would be paid for by American Home Shield. But there was going to be $600 of non-covered costs involved because alterations had to be made to the property. The buyer and seller were able to negotiate I think they ended up splitting that $600 fee. Closing occurred later that day. And after the buyer moved in, that's when they wanted to coordinate the water heater replacement. It happened in the next week or so. 3 days after the water heater failed, the dishwasher broke. I think it actually caught fire or something. It was one of those weird mechanical short outs or something. It was normal wear and tear, and that dishwasher was replaced. It's funny how things happen all around closing dates sometimes. I think the houses get their feelings hurt that they got sold, right? What's up with this, right? Somebody else is moving in. And when they talk about moving, yeah, moving is stressful for us. I remember the last time I got moved, right? But the house moves twice because the seller's using everything, getting everything ready, getting everything done. They move out, and just shortly thereafter, the buyer moves in again. And if it's hot weather like this, the doors are open and closed, open and closed, open and closed. That air conditioner is working harder than ever. And it just worked hard last week when the seller moved out, right? Guys, we have about two, on the average, we have about 2 repairs within every 30-day period after closing on almost every house we cover. It's crazy. So I hope you'll remember American Home Shield. If you have any questions, I put my information in the chat bar earlier. Does anybody have any more questions for me today? Well, I'm going to let y'all go. I'm going to stay on in case anybody else comes in with a question or thinks of something else, but I will be sending all that information out on an email in just a little while this afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Julia.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.